You can make way more money if you're able to keep track of every single opportunity. And the way in which you do this within GoHighLevel is through opportunities by having a pipeline. And quite simply, whenever someone books a call, we want to be able to add someone into a pipeline that we can keep track of as they go through our sales process. And that can seem quite complicated because everything that you do within GoHighLevel will ultimately be built around this process. But by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to set this up for yourself. Now, the first thing that I do want to say is that my sales process is probably going to be different to your sales process. Typically, I run it in one of two ways. Either when I've gone through and helped out clients because they get quite a lot of deals that come through and they get it in different ways, that we either have an SDR pipeline, which is just there for an SDR to go through and qualify them before moving them to a sales pipeline, or we just run a straight sales pipeline. In this case, we're going to be running a straight sales pipeline. I should also say that the process is also going to be slightly different based on your services and the things that you offer. So you just need to go through and take the time to map this out, in which I recommend using something like Figma, where you can just go through and map what needs to happen as each part. I'm going to show you what I have, and then from there, you can go through and make changes. So we need to go through, create a pipeline over on here. I'm going to go through and call this sales pipeline because, well, it's quite obvious what that is. From there, I'm going to go through and have call booked. I just want to have this set for when someone books a call. I've got other ways to keep track of everyone else. So I just need to go through and set this as call booked. We do not need to go through and do this for like new leads or anything because it's going to be a lot. You're going to get a lot of different opportunities and not every single one's going to be an opportunity. I would much rather just have this for call booked. I then have call completed, because this is going to be a status of where once the call is completed, I move them over to here and then it decides where I'm going to go through and do, but it doesn't get blended in with those where they're still currently booked. We have a no-show. So if they do not show, I want to move them over to this, which will then trigger an automation, which will then remind them what they need to go through and do. And they need to then go through and reschedule a call because they could still be an opportunity. A percentage of them would still reschedule. Some of them are just there to waste your time, which is always going to be the case. But we want to make sure that those who are actually interested, but life just happens, is going to come back and actually, book a call. We then have follow-up. There are going to be people who, when you're on a call, they don't necessarily, or they might actually want to go through and use your service, but they have other calls. There's other people that they need to speak to first. There's other things that they need to get in order. Maybe they want to go through and do something next week, in which it's the case that you try to get them to book another call for the next week. Some of them would say yes to that. Some of them won't say yes. They would just let you know that they're going to go through and contact you on email, which is always a bit of a red flag. But from there, you just want to go through and trigger an automation that you do continuously follow up with them through email in order to either get them to rebook, to get that second call, or to actually start the onboarding process. So this will actually trigger a daily task for you to then go through and follow up with that person based on the date that you then go through and say. I then also have two, which are custom to myself. I'm not actually going to add it to this because this is where you can add it. But for some people, when they jump on a call, we would then have our main offer that we try to go through and push. If they say that budget's a problem, we would then go through and downsell them into something else. If they're unsure that we can actually do it for them, we actually do a free offer, which would then be set. So we actually have statuses or stages based on those there. I'm not going to add it because it makes this video more complicated and it doesn't apply to you. It only applies to me. But this is where you would need to go through and think about what is needed within your stage. We do need a section where I have needs attention, which means if one of the automations failed or I'm missing some key details to trigger an automation, I just have it move over automatically to needs attention. And then it also creates a task within GoHighLevel as well. And then finally, I do have a stage, which is also for one, which might seem pointless. And it'll seem pointless in a second when I actually go through and create this, because you can drag and drop opportunities to a status of one rather than to a stage. But I like to move it, drag and drop it over to one, in which it triggers the automation. It starts the onboarding process. And once that's finished, I get that feedback loop that it's moved from whichever stage it's in over to one. And now I know the automation is complete. So it's literally there just for going through and having feedback. That is, in my opinion, the bare minimum of what you would need to get started. Now, once we have that, it now means that we can actually go back over to opportunities. We don't have anything here, but we can start to go through and see what has been set within this pipeline. Call booked, call completed, no show, follow up, needs attention, 1. Very, very simple. Now, I'm just going to take a quick detour just to go through and show you this. I've gone over to contacts and you can see that I've got myself over on here. This is actually a fresh account. So I'm going through and I'm just going to go and drag all the way down to opportunities. And then I'm going to go through and add myself into this pipeline. When I go through and do this, ideally we wouldn't need to go through and do this manually, but we actually haven't got any automation set up over on this account as of yet. But I can now go over and I will be able to go through and see myself there. Jamie, opportunity source, opt-in form. It's all there. I can now click on this and see what is needed. This is where you would need to make a decision of what information you want to hold on the opportunity and what information you hold within the contact, because you will need to go through and create custom fields. Now, typically the custom fields that I actually go through and set on sales calls when I'm actually going through and having those conversations, I'm not setting it to be part of the opportunity. There's a lot of stuff in there that is set on the contact. And if that's confusing, I'll explain it in a second and we'll actually be going through and running through this. But you just need to decide what information will be held on the contact and what information will be held on the opportunity. For opportunities, typically it's about who's going to be the account manager if they sell, what's the follow-up day, things like that, because then that will be able to be used to then trigger all automations. Anything else, which is about the business and about the person I'm talking about or talking to, sorry, is going to be listed on the contact. And that's just the way in which I like to run it. Some people that we've worked with like everything to be thrown to the opportunity. So then they can then go through and see absolutely everything, just move this across and they don't have to jump between this and then also having this in another tab where they need to actually see the contact in order to update the custom fields there. And then also update the custom fields within the opportunity itself. I like having it that way. What I mean by all of this though, is if we go over to settings, we will now be able to go through and find custom fields. And in here, we can go through and take a look at folders. Now this is the folders that we have currently on the contact because that's where it's set. I can actually go through and add a new folder, which is going to be sales call. So we can then go through, add something like that, and we would be able to go through and add certain types of questions, which are going to be within here. Something quite simple is that a question that I'm going to ask is that what's your offer and what's the pricing? So I might have something like offer plus pricing, and then that's going to be in our sales call. And then I could just go through and save that into here. That now means when we go back over to our contact, I can actually go through and refresh this. We will now see a section which will then say sales call, and we will be able to go through and find that section which says offer plus pricing, which is down here. So you just need to decide what's going to be on the contact, what's going to be on the opportunity. Since this video is about opportunities, we are now going to go over, change this from contact. We're going to go through and select opportunity, and we can now go through and create a section here. We can do the exact same thing on the opportunity. So I can go and add a folder. Let's go through and make sure that's opportunity. And we call this deals and offers. So I can then go through, hit save over on there. And we have a folder, which is now going to be within opportunities. I can then add fields into here. Let's say that we want to go through and actually have the deal value. So I could go through, put deal value. There is actually a section which says like opportunity value, I believe, but I like to set the opportunity value to be what I hope to go through and get or what I expect to get. And then the deal value is actually what I got. And that might be the case that I price each person individually before the call arrives of what I think that I can then go through and sell, and it pretty much rates them. And then it highlights what we actually were able to go through and sell on the call. But I can then go through, put deal value into here, then go through and save. Another one that's also worth going through and doing is that you will be able to go through and have a date picker, which is going to be next follow up dates. So then on that call, if they say, hey, we're interested, we've got a few more people to talk to, and I'll get back to you next week. I want to set a date for next week, which is when I'm going to follow up to them. What this now looks like is when we go back over to our opportunity, we can click this and we'll be able to see all of this information, which is there by default. But you can see deals and offers, which is where we have the deal value. And then we also have the next follow-up date. So you can start adding things which are specific to that opportunity. As an example, for mine, I have things like account manager, which just means if we were to sell them, who would be the account manager? So if they go, yep, let's get started, they pay, I would have a drop down, select the account manager, send it across. It then goes through and sends it over to the account manager to start onboarding them. Next follow update, deal value. We also set it up of like what Slack channel that they're going to have, whether or not it's going to be a actual channel where they can invite their own organization, or we invite their organization so that they can invite their own team members, or whether or not they're just going to go on the free version, which is a Slack Connect. We also have it set on what services that we sold, because we have a few that could be there, and that would then decide what our deal value is going to be. Everything else about the business, about the offer, about the pricing, about what their current bottleneck is, what they're struggling with, all goes onto the contact. And I like it to be on the contact because it will stay there forever. So that if they say, hey, look, it isn't for us right now, but we book 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months from now, then I still have that information. Not to mention that when I'm doing follow-ups, I can then still take a look at that information that was there previously and be like, hey, the last time that we spoke, you were thinking about going more aggressively and doing way more cold email outreach. How's that going? Knowing full well that at some point who's doing cold email outreach, they are going to see an increase in the cost that it is going to be for acquiring a customer, in which content is just perfect for lowering that cost. And that's where I can slide my service in to go through and get them to rebook a call and then help them out. This is where you will need to go through and make this choice for yourself, because what I have here is going to be different to what you have based on your service and what it is that you're interested in, and also what it is that you're about to deliver. But that's how you set up custom fields, and that's how you decide whether or not it goes on a contact or the opportunity. Now, let's actually take a look at automations. Now, with all of that in place, the next thing is to make this way easier where we can start using automations. And I'm going to show you two just to give you an intro to automations, but I do have another video which will also go through this as well. The first one is that we want an opportunity to be shown when someone books a call booked, but at the minute we're manually doing it. I had to manually do it when I went over to my contact, added myself. So the way in which we go through and do this is head over to automations. I'm going to go through and we are going to go and hit continue on this. And then we are going to go and create a new automation pretty much. And all I want to go through and do is I'm going to delete this action. You would, of course, go through and send an email. I'm just going to go through for the time being. We are going to create an opportunity, and this is going to go within the sales pipeline. And we are going to put the opportunity name to then be contact. Oh, contact's already there. Let's go back. Contact name, full name, hit save. So quite simply, when someone books a call, which we do not have set, I actually don't have calendars on this account. But when someone books a call, it will then go through, create an opportunity, and it'll put it within our sales pipeline with the contact name. Very easy. So that one is now set. This one we will call call booked email sequence. You would then, of course, expand upon that and then confirm, hey, you've just booked a call. This is what we're going to be going through and doing. This is the link for when the actual call happens. And then you can also go through and have reminders also set to here. So that is going to be one automation that we would need to also to have set in here. The other one is, for me, I'm going to say like very important, but at the exact same time, I don't want to put any time into actually doing this. And that's why the automation is important, which is we've scheduled a call, they're qualified, we've got prepared, and then they did not show. So I want to just simply drag and drop this over to no show, and then it will trigger the email sequence so that they would then, reschedule. In which we will now go back over, we create a new workflow. We do this from scratch. This time we do want to have it when an opportunity has been updated. So if we go pipeline stage changed, we add filters, we would then go through and find in pipeline, sales pipeline, and then we also want to go through and find the stage. I always get confused between stage and status simply because ClickUp, when I'm using that has statuses, which are each and every single section, kind of like these. But in GoHighLevel, they're called stages, and the status is whether or not it's open, closed, or sorry, open, lost, abandoned, or I forget what the others are. One's one. But we now want to go through pipeline stage, and then we want to say that it is, call booked, no show. So that's going to be the point in which it then triggers. We then want to go through, hit this plus sign, and we're going to go through and send an email. From there, we've got the from name. This is actually a custom value. You can set that up within your settings quite simply. You could put your name in here. You can manually do that. But if you were ever to update the name that you want to have shown on your email, then you then need to manually go through each and every single one. Or you could just set a custom value, set it to be from name, and then you can go through and just update the value within the values itself. And then the same with the email as well. We also have one which is from email, and then I'm going to go through and set that into there. Now this needs to be an immediate notice, so we're not going to go through and do anything here, but we're going to just go through and say, looks like we missed each other, and then no worries, you can grab a time here. Now I've got this email already set for me, so I can then just go through, paste that in, and there we go. It's telling them to go through and reschedule. I actually don't have any calendars set up on this account currently, so this is actually another link to my actual main GoHighLevel. But people can then go through reschedule from here, and we want to be able to go through and send that immediately. I actually have other automations which then updates my own Google Sheet, which is for reporting for myself. I would then trigger a webhook here, but we don't need to in this case, because of course I'm using this as an example and you don't have that Google Sheet set up. But this will be immediate notice. So the second that someone does not show and I'm drag and drop that over to the pipeline, it will then go through and trigger this automation. I wouldn't stop there. I would go through, hit wait, and then I would also change this from a time delay to then being a contact reply and checking to see whether or not they've replied. Ultimately, I want to see if they're going to reply to this email. It may be the case that they're just not interested anymore, in which like, it's fine. It's disappointing, but it's fine. I don't want to keep on sending them emails. It may be that they reschedule, in which when they do book a call, typically my other automation removes them from all other workflows apart from that one, which then would mean they get removed from this workflow. So they wouldn't get the other emails. But if they do not reply, then it's a case that we want to keep on going through and sending this to them. So this is going to be days, 1 day, that it's either going to be when the contact replies, in which we can end it because they could say, yeah, I've booked a call, and of course they're removed, or I'll book in like the next hour or so, whatever it may be, or not interested, it ends. But anything else, we would then be able to go through, copy this action, paste over in here, and then we can go through and send another email, which is yet again, it's different, but at the same time, the goal is to go through and get them to rebook. So we would then be able to go through and send something like this. Still want the inbound pipeline. You can rebook a call here, and then we've got a different email, which will then be sent over to them. So we can then go through, hey, contact first name, just checking in quickly. You still want to map out your inbound pipeline, reschedule link. It only takes 30 minutes, and then go through, hit save. You can, at this point, keep on going through, copy all actions from here, paste, and then you can go through and do the same thing again, and then decide what schedule that you're going to go through and do. Ultimately, it's the same thing over and over again. You just need to decide what days that you're going to do. Typically, I do immediate, and then I go through and do 1 day later, 1 day later. Next one's going to be 3 days later. After that, I do another 2 days later, and then I do 7 days later. So you can then be able to go through and set this email follow-up chain to be however long that you want it to go through and be. And this is going to be our no-show email sequence. So all of that would then be set, and we just keep that going. So that now keeps us set up for this pipeline. Everything is good. The only thing that you would need to go through and do from here is be able to set what else is needed. So if you were to go through and do a follow-up, what you would want to go through and check is to see whether or not you actually have a follow-up date set. That means when we go over to automations, it's actually quite similar to what we've been able to go through and do already, except now when we're over on here, we are going to have a pipeline, an opportunity stage change. So we got a stage change. This time it's the same as before. So in pipeline, sales pipeline, we are then going to go through and say stage. This time though, it is going to be follow up. And now we just need to check to see if else, whether or not the opportunity next follow-up date, which will be a custom field at the bottom, is actually is not empty. And then we can go through and set that. So as long as that's not empty, we can actually go through and set up a follow-up. Now, I can't actually finish this automation because what I end up doing is actually trigger a webhook. And then I go through and I actually trigger a webhook to make. So it creates a follow-up task on ClickUp. I personally don't like doing follow-ups within GoHighLevel. Even before, I did set these as tasks within GoHighLevel, and I still had to send a webhook to make for it to create a task within GoHighLevel because I had to do some extra stuff that I wanted to go through and check in terms of dates and all of that stuff, which I could not go through and do within GoHighLevel. So this is where you do have a few limitations, but you would then have a webhook in here. I can't go through and do that. If it is the case that it's not met, meaning that it is empty, then it's the case that you would want to go through and update the opportunity. So update, and we want to be able to go through and update opportunity. We now want to go and set this to be pipeline in here. And now we want to go through, do pipeline stage, and we just put this as needs attention. You could also then go through and add a task, which will then be linked to this. So missing next follow-up date. This is missing the next follow-up date. You can assign it to the person, and then you could say that it's due now. So that way, if something is missing follow-up date, we can then, of course, go through and have this be set. So if we tried to follow up with Jamie, we haven't actually got a next follow-up date set, but if we try to go through and follow up, what will end up happening is that I'll trigger the automation. It will move to needs attention. And not only that, but it'll also go through and show up within our contact task. So over in here, needs attention, because it cannot complete the automation like it is supposed to. And now when we go over to here, we would then have a task, which would then be to follow up. There you go. Missing next follow-up date. This is missing the next follow-up date, who it's contacted to, who the assignee is, and then of course when it's due, which is today. So this is how you can go through, keep it clean, and also keep yourself accountable to follow the system that you've set in place. This is how you can go through and build out your pipeline. Now that we do have a pipeline in place, the next thing that we need to make sure that we do is actually have opportunities coming into this pipeline. If not, this was a complete waste, in which I highly recommend watching this video right here. This video will show you exactly how you can have your clients come into you and they're already looking to buy. I hope you enjoy.